Good evening, everyone. David Paulides here with Missing 411. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that chills me to the bone. Even after all these years investigating these baffling disappearances, we're going to discuss a phenomenon I've encountered countless times in the thousands of missing person cases I've documented for Missing 411. A factor that twists the knife of an already agonizing mystery. I'm talking about accelerated decomposition in relation to what I can only describe as time distortion theories. Now, some of you might be thinking, Paulides, what are you talking about? Decomposition is natural. And yes, it is. But what I'm stating tonight are the facts about bodies found in conditions that defy logical explanation. Bodies found weeks, sometimes months, after a disappearance, in states of decay that suggest they've been gone for far, far longer. Or, conversely, found in a condition that suggests they've been missing for a very short time. It's as if time itself has been warped, stretched, or compressed. And when you couple this with the classic Missing 411 profile points, the sudden silence, the baffling K9 failures, the immediate bad weather, you begin to see a pattern emerge. It's a pattern, frankly, that I believe the authorities have no explanation for. And they certainly aren't going to tell you about it. Let's get into some of these cases. I'm going to share details that some of you might find disturbing. But it's crucial we understand the true nature of what's happening in our wildlands. Let's start with a case that has always troubled me deeply. The disappearance of Michael Jeffrey Fisery in Yosemite National Park. This was back on July 15th, 2005. Michael, a 1-year-old experienced hiker, was out with a friend hiking the upper reaches of the Chilnawalna Falls Trail. They planned a challenging loop, and Michael was well prepared, in good physical condition. At one point, Michael decided to take a short side trail to look at a waterfall, telling his friend he'd meet him back on the main trail in just a few minutes. A few minutes. Think about that. His friend waited. And waited. Michael Fisery never returned. Now, this isn't an uncommon occurrence for us with Missing 411. But here's where it gets disturbing. A massive search was launched. Hundreds of searchers. K9 teams. Helicopters. They scoured that area for days. Nothing. No trace. It was as if he'd simply stepped off the face of the earth. Fast forward over 3 years. 3 long years. On October 12th, 2008, a hiker stumbled upon human remains off trail, several miles from where Michael was last seen, in extremely rugged, difficult terrain. The remains were later positively identified as Michael Fisery. The Park Service's official line was that he likely got lost and succumbed to the elements. But the condition of the remains, this is where the accelerated decomposition aspect comes into play. Reports indicate the skeletal remains were found scattered, suggesting animal activity. But the extent of decay for 3 years was unusually advanced. There was very little soft tissue remaining, far less than what would typically be expected in that climate. It was almost as if his body had been exposed to conditions that unnaturally accelerated its breakdown, making it appear as if far more time had passed. And here's the kicker. The location was so remote, so rugged, that searchers had been within 200 yards of that exact spot during the initial extensive search. 200 yards. How could an experienced hiker, even disoriented, end up in such a spot? And more importantly, how could a body have been missed for 3 years in an area that was thoroughly searched? It speaks to that classic missing 411 phenomenon. Let's move to another case. This one from the Pacific Northwest, showcasing similar troubling characteristics. The disappearance of Paul Miller in the Olympic National Forest, Washington. This happened in June of 2011. Paul, a five-year-old man, went for a hike with his dog. The initial plan was a simple day hike. His dog, a border collie named Chloe, eventually made it back to the trailhead alone. 2 days later, search teams, including K9 units, immediately converged on the area. The dogs initially picked up a scent, but it quickly vanished. Classic missing 411 behavior. It was as if Paul Miller had simply dissolved into thin air. Within hours of his disappearance, the weather in the area turned severe. Heavy rain, dropping temperatures, another chillingly familiar pattern. Bad weather almost always follows these disappearances, obscuring trails, making tracking impossible. Months passed. Then, in November of 2011, hunters found skeletal remains roughly 2 miles from the trailhead. These remains were identified as Paul Miller. What's significant here, and why it fits our theme of accelerated decomposition, is the state of the remains after only 5 months. The forensic reports indicated a level of decomposition that surprised investigators for the specific conditions and duration. It was nearly skeletal, leading some to unofficially question if the objective timeline truly matched the observed biological breakdown. How was he missed for 5 months? Only to be found by chance, by hunters. And what about the dog? Chloe was known to be loyal. Why would she return without Paul? And why couldn't she lead searchers directly to him? It's as if something prevented her from staying with him. Or perhaps something led her away. Finally, let's go across the globe to the Australian outback. This one involves Patrick Francis Bellew, missing since October 12th, 1989, in Queensland, Australia. Patrick, 42 years old, had gone out fishing alone on the Burnett River. A vast search was mounted. His vehicle was found parked near the river, his fishing gear nearby. K9s were deployed. But just like in so many of our missing 411 cases, their scent trails vanished into thin air. 9 months later, on July 15th, 1990, a farmer found human remains in a very isolated, heavily vegetated area. A significant distance from the river, the remains were positively identified as Patrick Bellew. Here's the critical point for our discussion tonight: the state of his remains. Even in the hot, humid Australian climate, the body was almost entirely skeletal. Investigators noted the advanced state of decay, almost as if the body had been exposed to conditions that rapidly broke down the tissues over a much longer period than 9 months. It's a contradiction. So, what are we seeing here? It's not just one isolated incident. It's a recurring theme across continents. Among cases that fit the missing 411 profile, their K9 scent trails evaporate. Bad weather often descends immediately. And then, if they are found, their remains are in a condition that simply doesn't add up. It's as if, for some victims, the natural process of decomposition has been aggressively sped up or for others. The timeline itself is out of sync. This forces us to consider a disturbing possibility. What if these individuals aren't just getting lost and dying of exposure? What if something else is at play? Something that can manipulate not just their location, but the very fabric of time around them. This brings us to a theory that I've been wrestling with for years. A theory that explains the impossible relocation, the lack of scent, and crucially, the abnormal decomposition. I'm talking about dimensional portals. Think about it. What if, at the moment of disappearance, these individuals, or even just the space they occupy, are briefly shunted into another dimension, a place where the laws of physics, as we understand them, might be different. A place where time itself might flow at a different rate. The K9S can't track them because they've literally left our dimension. When they reemerge, perhaps days or weeks later from their subjective experience, hours or years have passed in our world. Or, conversely, they might be in a dimension where time moves incredibly fast, accelerating their decomposition. This could explain the impossible distances covered by some small children, or how bodies appear in locations that have been meticulously searched. They weren't there when the searchers passed. They were somewhere else. The silence that descends, the sudden bad weather. Could these be effects related to the opening or closing of these temporary tears in reality? The energy required for such a phenomenon could disrupt local weather patterns. I'm not saying this is definitive. I'm stating that the known facts of these missing 411 cases, particularly those showing signs of accelerated decomposition and impossible timelines, push us beyond conventional explanations. They force us to consider possibilities that sound outlandish, but which, when you look at the evidence, start to make a frightening kind of sense. The woods are a strange place. There are things happening out there that defy our understanding. The families of these victims deserve answers. They deserve to know why their loved ones vanished, why their remains were found in such baffling conditions. But the truth is, the authorities often have no answers, and they prefer to stick to conventional narratives, no matter how illogical they seem. This phenomenon of accelerated decomposition in our missing 411 cases isn't just a grim detail. It's a critical clue. It's telling us that something profoundly unnatural is at play, manipulating not just lives, but potentially the very fabric of existence itself. Stay safe out there. Be aware. And remember, when you venture into the wildlands, you might not be alone. And you might not be in the only dimension. This is David Paulides for Missing 411. Good night.